Hello, my friends. This is William with the 1921 Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series, and we have some very, very interesting material today for the second part of the 7th of March 1921, which was a Monday. So, to recap that, Dmitri had this interesting meeting with leaders of the Berlin monarchists, the White Russian Berlin monarchists, and they ended up getting him to sign a document confirming that he was now the nominal leader of the Berlin monarchists. And you had two different groups involved in this, actually, a group led by Markov II and a group led by Biskupski, whom we've talked about at some length, and this group of 3 lawyers that were there as well. And he almost immediately had some misgivings about that because he didn't really it wasn't clear to him. I won't say he didn't understand it, because that makes it sound like he wasn't, like he was stupid, like he wasn't capable of understanding it, and he was. But I think he was a guy who just kind of had a hard time saying no, and he wasn't really clear on what they wanted from him or what this would involve. He wasn't clear on that at all, so obviously he shouldn't have signed it. Obviously he realized he shouldn't have signed it. I wonder if Kirill had anything to do with him being willing to immediately sign this thing, if he was afraid that if he didn't sign it, Kirill was going to dive right in, or they were just going to make a beeline to Kirill and ask him to assume this role. So maybe that was one of the reasons, but we all do foolish things sometimes. The other topic of discussion was whether to ask for a refutation of this article in one of the local emigre newspapers, which quoted Dmitri. I don't know if it was in quotation marks, but alleged that he had said that all of these efforts of the monarchists in Germany were premature, and Dmitri did not want such a correction or such a request to be sent, and he was very discouraged when the various people that were there at that meeting just started fighting over it, and it seemed really petty to him. Okay, so that's the recap. And now, as for the cast today, we have some people that we already know, and that were mentioned in the first part of this diary entry. And we also have 2 people that we don't know, a man named Garfeld, not Garfield, but Garfeld with F-E-L-D instead of F-I-E-L-D, and a man named Goltz, who was German. Garfeld was actually a White Russian, but Goltz was German, and Goltz was the commander of something called the Iron Division. So the officers of the Iron Division will also appear in this diary entry. So let's dive right into that. At 4:30, I went to Vera's to say goodbye, and then to Princess Baryatinskaya's. I really did find Uncle Pavel there. He's hardly changed at all. Garfeld and Sverbeev were there. The latter spoke so kindly to me. I dined at the hotel, and at 10:15 left from Friedrichstrasse Bahnhof. No one was at the station. I wouldn't let anyone come. There were only the officers and a German security detail. I forgot to say that the whole 6 days of my stay in Berlin, there were officers in civilian clothes from Goltz's organization, the Iron Division, on duty around me day and night. Before my departure, I received each of them individually and thanked them. When the train started moving, I breathed a sigh of relief, but there was a heaviness in my soul because I understood perfectly well that everything that had happened in Berlin had been done with too much fanfare, and there would inevitably be unpleasant consequences. And the role, in fact, could only be a very small one. More likely than not, it was all just an audition. Galeevsky was showing me off, or rather bringing me out. Okay, so that is what Dmitri has to say. I'm not sure exactly what he means by bringing me out. It's a fairly straightforward translation, but showing me off is more clear. And yeah, this idea that it was an audition, that's been pretty clear all along. But he's leaving Berlin very discouraged. And when he says the role, in fact, could only be a very small one, it's kind of a non sequitur, but I believe what he's referring to is this role that he agreed to play, and he signed the document saying he would be the leader of the white Russian monarchist movement in Germany. Okay, and the more he gets out of that environment, the more he realizes that this was not a good idea. So we'll learn a lot more about that later. Okay, so he said his goodbye to Vera. No sentimentality involved, at least none that he's willing to tell us about. And she was perhaps one of the people whom he asked not to come to the station. He doesn't want anybody to come to the station. Of all these people he's met, even the people that are, his pre-revolutionary friends, he's realized that all this fanfare is not a good idea. He doesn't even want Vera to come. Well, anyway, so nobody comes, and they honor that request. So, he goes to Vera's at 4:30. He doesn't say they eat anything. He just goes to say goodbye, and then he goes to Princess Baryatinskaya's place to see Uncle Paul, Duke Paul of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, or was he first? Was he Herzog, or was he first? Probably Prince, actually. But anyway, Marie Antoinette, this one who he insulted by calling her Fat Marie Antoinette, was apparently not there. Baryatinskaya had told him that Marie Antoinette was staying with her, but maybe Marie Antoinette didn't want to be there when her rude relative turned up. Anyway, if she was there, he doesn't mention her. But Sverbeyev was there. That's interesting. So these other people were there. Sverbeyev, Sergei Nikolaevich, you remember him. He was the former ambassador to Germany, Russian ambassador to Germany, who left when war was declared between Russia and Germany in August 1914. And then we have this Garfield, Alexei Fyodorovich, Baltic German. Dmitri seems to have known him before the revolution from the way that he refers to him. He was actually the director of the state bank in pre-revolutionary Russia. And he was, before that, he had served in the Ministry of Finance. And he's mentioned here and there in my various books on the emigration in France. Not really in the emigration in Germany. He was a financier, apparently. He was a money man, and, Dmitri doesn't say that they talked about anything in particular, but he does say that Sverbeyev talked to him in a very kind or nice way. And, that's kind of a peculiarity of Dmitri's. He says that people are kind to him. And, why wouldn't they be? But if he feels that somebody has been particularly kind to him, he always mentions that. So that's a nice trait, I guess. Anyway, Garfield would eventually move from Berlin to France, and in fact would turn up again, not in the diaries, but in Dmitri's address book for 1927. So, we have his address in Paris in 1927 for what it's worth. Okay, it would be interesting to know what Sverbeyev had to say to Dmitri that was so kind. Anyway, now we turn to Rüdiger van der Goltz and the Iron Division. So, van der Goltz, very interesting character. He was, at this time in 1921, he was in his mid to late 50s, depending on where you make the cutoff, 56, 57, somewhere around then. He'd been important in the First World War. He'd been an important general in the First World War. He had commanded the Baltic Sea Division, and in 1918, after the revolution, in 1918, the Baltic Sea Division had intervened in the Finnish Civil War in attempt to keep the Bolsheviks out of Finland. So thank goodness the Bolsheviks were not able to gobble Finland up. And, so that was a good thing, right? But then he got a little too grabby with things, right? So he really wanted Germany to have these territories, like Finland. He wanted Germany to be basically in charge there, even though there would be a Finnish government. And it's been said that he himself was, for all intents and purposes, I'm quoting from the Wikipedia article on him, in practice, he ruled the country as a military dictator. Okay, so not for very long. He then moved on to the Baltic states, specifically to Latvia. And after the armistice, he commanded the army of the German government. So these were German troops in Latvia. And that surprised me. You know that there were German troops in Latvia, that the Allies were aware of it, and that they even tacitly supported it because they didn't want the Bolsheviks to come in and gobble up Latvia or Lithuania or Estonia. So they allowed it. And indeed, the Bolsheviks were defeated in Latvia in 1919. But the problem then was that the Goltz and his Iron Division wanted to stay. They didn't want to leave. They wanted to be a sort of permanent or semi-permanent contingent there on behalf of Germany. And in fact, when he'd been in Finland, Goltz, what was that weird noise I made? Goltz had wanted Germany, as I say, to control Finland to the extent that German officers would command a Finnish conscript army, and that this Finnish conscript army was going to intervene against the Allied effort in Murmansk and Arkhangelsk. So this was before the armistice. I just forgot to mention it. So Goltz actually wanted to use the Finnish army to fight the Allies. There were Allied troops that went in after the revolution to these far northern ports, Murmansk and Arkhangelsk. There were mainly British, I think, also Americans, probably French. I mean, it was an Allied effort. And yeah, Goltz wanted to command the Finland army to go fight against the Allies. So yeah, I mean, the peace hadn't been signed yet, so I guess that's what he naturally would want. But anyway, now that he's, after the armistice, when he was in Latvia, again, he wanted the German troops to stay there. He wanted them to stay in Latvia and Estonia, ostensibly to keep the Bolsheviks out. And to that end, after the official German troops were withdrawing, he created this so-called Iron Division using Freikorps soldiers who refused to be demobilized. And they were, of course, very bitter about the outcome of the First World War. They refused to be demobilized, and they formed this Iron Division. And they were joined by the remnants of the German 8th Army and additional volunteers from Germany. According to Wikipedia, I'm getting this, quite frankly, all from Wikipedia. I don't have any time or at this point, really, any strong desire to go into greater depth. I'll save that for later, not for a video, but, for my actual book. And after Latvia was pretty much cleared of Bolsheviks and not really in danger anymore, the Allies insisted, now it's time for you to leave. The official German forces have already withdrawn, and the Iron Division needs to withdraw too. And they put pressure on the Weimar government to basically fire Goltz and tell him you have to get out. And in fact, what Goltz had in mind then was he he tried to seize Latvia for Germany. Then when that didn't work, in June 1919, he directed his troops towards Estonia, to advance into Estonia and to take over Estonia instead of fighting the Red Army. So he was more, almost more pro-German than anti-Bolshevik. And the Iron Division was then defeated by the 3rd Estonian Division. And yeah, the British government put their foot down. Goltz was forced finally to leave. And so then he went and turned up in Berlin. But anyway, in his memoirs that he wrote later, he claimed that he had intended to join up with White Russian forces and march on Petrograd to install a pro-German government in Russia. So no matter what it was, what territory he was fighting for, he was fighting for Germany more than against the Bolsheviks. So, you know, that makes it all the more ironic that Dmitri went along with having these plainclothes officers from the Iron Division guarding him, because Dmitri was first and foremost, no matter what, first and foremost, there should be no foreign influence or interference in Russia ever. And in fact, when the Poles were fighting against the Red Army, he had been really divided on that, because on the one hand, he'd wanted to see the Red Army, the Bolsheviks, be defeated, but on the other hand, these were Russian soldiers. And he fully appreciated that. He did not want the Russian soldiers to be beat by the Polish soldiers, and so he was in a real quandary about that. And so I can't imagine that he really knew what Goltz was up to, and that Goltz actually wanted there to be a pro-German government, a strong pro-German government, a strong government that was beholden to Germany. I'm sure, you know, I absolutely know 100% that that was not what Dmitri wanted. So I think this was another instance of really not being careful enough. So Goltz had after he got back to Germany, he had participated in the Kapp Putsch, the attempt to overthrow the Weimar government by right-wing extremists and disgruntled officers, and that, of course, was defeated. So it's kind of interesting that Goltz was still at liberty. You know, the Weimar government, I guess, were pretty tolerant. They weren't putting him in in custody or kicking him out of the country. He was free to go around conspiring against them. I don't gather that he was a Nazi. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see anything that indicates that he joined the Nazi party at any point. Maybe he did. I don't know. I just haven't found anything, certainly not in the Wikipedia entry. There was nothing about him having joined the party or having done anything during World War II. He died in 1946, and during the Second World War, he was in his 70s, and he would have been already, you know, say 77 in 1941. So it's not surprising that he didn't do anything. Okay, so I'm frankly confused by this, because back in the March 15th long diary entry, Dmitri says that when he arrived in Germany, he had this, he refers to them specifically as a group of guards officers who were on duty with him. And there were 6 of them, and they were constantly on duty with him. And that you know, I assume when he says guards officers, why would he say guards officers if he was referring to these men from the Iron Division? So maybe there were both. Maybe he had the Russian guards officers there to be acting like ADCs to him, and then there were these Iron Guard German officers, not Russian, and they were ostensibly guarding him night and day against whoever might want to harm him in any way. So, quite rightly, Upon departure, he met with each man and thanked him, and that was certainly the appropriate thing to do. But I just don't see how it could have been the case that he understood what the aims of the Iron Division were. Yes, they were willing to fight alongside the right-wing White Russian troops, such as they were, but they were doing it for Germany. All right, now as he's leaving, taking this late train, he tells us that he leaves with a heaviness in my soul. So he had definitely understood that things had gotten way out of control and that there was going to be hell to pay when he got back. There was going to be a serious backlash. And he also understood that he was basically being used. So he ends this by saying that, yeah, Golevsky was just showing me off. This role is, it can only be a very small one. And yeah, so he understands that now. He's a little the wiser for having this experience. So next time, we're going to find out about the train journey and the difficulty that he'll have getting back into France. He no longer has his magic pass that he used to go from Denmark into Germany. And then when he gets back, he'll be going to Maria's and reuniting with her. And, he'll already be understanding that things are about to blow up in his face. And in fact, in the diary entries that are coming up, he will be facing the wrath of Ducky, or at least he'll think he's going to be facing the wrath of Ducky. He'll get this ominous message that Ducky wants to see him, and he will jump to the conclusion that this is going to be bad. And I have not read the diary entry, or I should say reread, because I read it years ago, but I haven't reread the diary entry where he does indeed go to meet with Ducky. At their first meeting back in 1920, when she first arrived in Paris and asked to speak to Dmitri, it was to tell him that he should be shot. I mentioned that before, that he was a traitor to the rightful heir to the throne, which was her husband, and he should just be shot. So we'll see what she has to say this time. I think if it was more dramatic than that, or as dramatic as that, I would remember it, but we'll see. And that is when Coco re-enters the scene. When the S hits the fan, so to speak, Coco is the refuge that Dmitri is able to find. All right, so exciting stuff coming back. And yeah, come back. See you next time. Bye.